The city buzzed with life, its lights cutting through the night like veins of energy running to the heart of the world. Malik Westbrook, billionaire and medical mogul, sat in the back of his black SUV, his eyes staring blankly at the passing skyline. The endless hum of his business life, the board meetings, the luxury, the fame, it all felt like a distant echo, something that no longer mattered. The gala he had just left was a blur of faces he didn't recognize, of plastic smiles, of empty words. The world around him was full of celebration, yet his own heart felt achingly still. His phone buzzed with notifications, a reminder that his empire still needed tending. But tonight, he didn't care about the wealth that surrounded him. His thoughts were consumed by the loneliness he'd been hiding for years. The glittering towers, the endless parties, the endless praise. None of it was enough to fill the hollow space that had been growing inside him since Tessa had walked away. The car slowed as he reached the outskirts of the city, the lights dimming as he left behind the world he had built. Malik didn't know why he'd driven here, but it felt like the right thing to do. The city felt distant, like an illusion he could never touch, while the people in it, people like Tessa, the woman he had loved and lost, felt like a reminder of everything he had sacrificed. He made a turn down a street, heading toward the quieter, more forgotten part of the city. As the car rolled slowly through the dim-lit streets of Eastwood, he spotted a small crowd gathered near an abandoned storefront. The sight of Tessa standing there, her face pale, streaked with tears, her posture somehow still defiant despite the cold, shocked him to his core. It wasn't the worn clothing, the desperation in her eyes, or the chill in the air that rattled him. It was the familiarity. In her worn, exhausted form, she was still the woman who had once been everything to him, the woman he had walked away from without a second thought. "Tessa," he whispered, almost afraid to say her name aloud. The snow was falling lightly around them, the world muffled by the soft drift of white. She turned slowly, eyes meeting his, and for a moment, time stood still. Her gaze, heavy with pain and disbelief, flickered with the faintest recognition. And in that single glance, all the walls between them came crashing down. Malik. Her voice was barely audible, and yet it pierced through him, wrapping him in guilt, in longing, and in something deeper, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Her body stiffened as he took a step closer. He could see it then. The children. 2 boys, 1 girl, his children, huddled together, shivering in the cold, their faces filled with fear and confusion. They looked so much like him, and yet they were strangers. The realization hit Malik like a wave, suffocating him with regret. Without thinking, he stepped toward them, his hand reaching out. Tessa instinctively pulled the children closer to her, a protective shield. Her eyes narrowed, the hard edge of a woman who had been betrayed by him all too evident in her gaze. "Don't come near us," she said softly, her voice tinged with resentment and pain. "Please," Malik began, his voice cracking under the weight of the years that had passed. "What happened to you? Why are you out here? I thought you were fine." Tessa's eyes dropped to the ground, as though the truth was too much for her to bear. But then, with a voice broken by exhaustion, she finally spoke. "We've been out here for months, Malik. I had no choice. No one would help." The words cut him to the bone. Malik's gaze fell to the children, his mind racing. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It wasn't about wealth or empire. It was about the family he had left behind. His children, his flesh and blood, were suffering, and he hadn't even known. The guilt swelled within him, choking out any defense he might have had. "They're freezing, Tessa." "They need warmth," Malik said, his voice thick with emotion. Tessa trembled as she tried to gather the children, the weakness in her body finally giving way to tears. She hadn't asked for help. She never had. But Malik wasn't going to leave them here. Not like this, without another word, Malik shrugged off his coat and knelt in front of the children. They were small, fragile, and the cold had already begun to creep into their skin. He scooped the youngest into his arms and immediately felt the weight of his actions, the years of absence, and the sudden responsibility that came crashing down on him. Tessa watched, her pride still fighting, but something broke in her, and she followed him without protest. She didn't say a word as they all climbed into the warmth of Malik's SUV, the tension thick between them. The car smelled of leather and freshly polished wood, a stark contrast to the cold, musty air outside. Malik glanced in the rearview mirror at Tessa, his heart hammering in his chest. There were so many things he needed to say, but for once, he was silent. He couldn't find the words. "How long have you been out here?" he asked, his voice low. "A few months," Tessa answered quietly, the weight of the years in her voice. Malik gripped the steering wheel tighter. The snow began to fall harder, coating everything outside with a blanket of white. But inside the car, he couldn't escape the feeling of emptiness that lingered. As he drove toward the penthouse, a place of wealth and luxury that had once been his empire, Malik couldn't help but feel like a fraud. He had built a life that was supposed to be perfect, but it had never been complete. And now, the true test was upon him. He opened the door for Tessa and the children, who looked up at the towering building in disbelief. Tessa's eyes were wide, torn between surprise and shame. "Welcome to your new home," Malik said softly. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the untouchable billionaire. Instead, he felt like something else. Something raw. Something human. The days following their arrival at Malik's penthouse were a strange mix of awkward silence and unexpected intimacy. The vast, luxurious space, filled with high-end furniture and expansive views, felt like a different world from the cold, damp streets where Tessa and the children had been living. But despite the grandeur, there was an undeniable emptiness. The wealth Malik had once taken pride in now felt insufficient to fill the chasm that stretched between him and Tessa. Tessa didn't want his help, not in the way he was offering it. Every meal he bought, every doctor he sent over, felt like a reminder of the gap between them. The children, still wary of the stranger they now called their father, stayed close to her, watching him with silent eyes that seemed to see through him, measuring him. Malik found himself pulled between his desire to fix everything and his understanding that this wasn't something that could be solved with money or grand gestures. He had been absent for years, and now it was clear that he couldn't expect to just waltz back into their lives and make it right. The house felt colder, despite the warmth of the heating system. Every time he turned a corner, he was reminded of the distance between them. Tessa's pride, her strength, and the walls she had built were palpable in every room. She didn't want his charity. She wanted him, the man she had loved, but the man who had walked away. Tessa sat at the kitchen counter late one evening, her hands curled around a mug of hot tea, staring out the window at the falling snow. The children had finally fallen asleep, and the silence in the apartment was suffocating. She had learned to live with silence, but tonight it felt like a weight. Malik stepped into the kitchen quietly, his presence filling the space. He didn't speak at first, just watched her, his gaze soft. "I'm sorry," Tessa said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I'm sorry for everything. For everything I said when I left. For everything you did. But we're still strangers now, Malik. And I don't know how to fix that." Malik's heart twisted as he heard the bitterness in her voice, the residual hurt from the years they had spent apart. She had every right to feel the way she did, but it didn't make the words hurt any less. "You don't have to fix anything," he replied softly. "I'm the one who needs to fix things." Tessa turned to him, her face guarded. "You can't fix everything, Malik. You can't just throw money at it. You can't throw wealth at love, at family. I've done everything on my own, and I've learned to survive. But I can't trust you again, not like before." There was a long pause between them, the weight of everything left unsaid pressing in. Malik stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. He didn't have the words to change her mind, but there was something in him now, something he hadn't felt in a long time. "I don't want to fix everything, Tessa," Malik said quietly. "I just want to be here. For you, for the kids. I don't care about the money. I care about this. About us. About the family we were supposed to be." Tessa's chest tightened, and she looked away, blinking back the tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed. The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. It wasn't like before. It wasn't the confident, arrogant man who had once dismissed her feelings. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the warmth of his words, the sincerity in his eyes. It was a glimpse of the man she had once loved, a man she wasn't sure could ever return, but a man she desperately needed now. "Why did you leave?" she asked quietly, the question lingering in the air between them. Malik closed the distance between them, his hand gently cupping her chin, lifting her face to meet his. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could have it all. But what I didn't realize was that having it all meant nothing if I didn't have you." Her breath caught, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. It was just them, standing in the middle of the kitchen, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future hanging between them. She had spent so long shutting him out, building a life without him. But now, with him standing so close, so vulnerable, something in her heart began to crack open. "I was wrong," Malik whispered, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "I was wrong to let you go. I was wrong to let the world get in the way of us." Tessa closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the warmth of his touch. The ache in her chest seemed to soften. She couldn't fix everything, not right now. But for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, they could start again. Flashback. The last time he left. Timing. As Tessa reflects on Malik's betrayal and the difficulty of opening up again. Tessa remembered the last time Malik had left. It wasn't the dramatic goodbye she had imagined. It wasn't a confrontation or a stormy exit. It was silent. He had simply told her that he had to focus on the business, on building his empire, and that they would be fine. But she wasn't fine. She had watched him walk out the door, his back straight, his posture confident. He had turned once to look at her, his face unreadable, and then the door had closed behind him. That was the last time she had seen him. She had waited for him to come back. But he never did. Instead, she had to raise her children on her own, building a life from nothing, constantly reminding herself that she didn't need him. But now he was here. And despite everything, she could feel herself starting to believe in him again. Tessa blinked, the memories slipping away as she met Malik's eyes once more. "I don't know how to trust you again," she whispered, "but I want to believe you." Malik's chest tightened at her words, but he didn't let go. He couldn't let go. He had already lost her once, and he wouldn't lose her again. "I won't give up on you, Tessa. Not now, not ever." The days that followed were filled with a quiet intensity. Malik, driven by a newfound sense of responsibility, continued his quest to heal the rift between him and Tessa, but his attempts, though earnest, fell short in some ways. Tessa's pride, built from years of carrying the burden alone, didn't bend easily. She appreciated his gestures, the medical teams he brought in, and the luxury of the penthouse, but the walls she had built were high. Her heart was not as easy to win back as the comfort Malik could provide. And then there was the matter of the children. Each day, Malik spent more time with them, trying to break through their initial distrust. The boys, though quiet, would occasionally meet his gaze, their eyes full of cautious hope Malik hadn't expected. The girl, though younger, seemed to look at him like he was the missing piece to a puzzle she had long since abandoned hope of solving. But despite these fragile moments, Malik could sense the weight of their fear, the emotional scars from the absence of their father. But it wasn't just the children who needed healing, it was Tessa. And that realization hit Malik harder than he could have anticipated. It was late one evening when the quiet, tender moments between Malik and Tessa finally shifted. They were in the living room, the warmth from the fireplace crackling in the background. The children had just gone to bed, leaving the two of them alone. Two people who had once shared a love they both now struggled to remember. Malik glanced over at Tessa, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. She was sitting at the edge of the sofa, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the mug in her hands. Her eyes were distant, lost in thought, and for a moment Malik didn't know what to say. But then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, yet heavy with emotion. "You know, Malik," she began, "I never wanted this life. I never wanted to be alone, to do this by myself. But I had to be, for them." Malik's chest tightened at the weight of her words. It was the first time she had openly admitted the pain she had carried all these years. And in that moment, he realized just how much he had missed. "I'm sorry," Malik whispered, his voice thick with regret. He moved closer, his hand gently brushing against hers. "I should have been there. For you. For them." Tessa's gaze flickered up to meet his, and there was a softness in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. But that softness was mixed with something else, uncertainty. "You can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just forgive you for leaving us. For all the years you weren't there. I spent so long telling myself I didn't need you, but now..." Her words trailed off, and Malik could feel the weight of her vulnerability hanging in the air between them. He reached for her hand, his thumb gently running over her knuckles. I know it's not that simple," he said softly. "But I'm here now, Tessa, and I swear to you, I will do everything in my power to make things right. Not just for you, but for them, for our family." For the first time in what felt like forever, Tessa's walls seemed to tremble. She didn't pull away from him. Instead, she let her hand rest in his, the simple act speaking volumes. Malik leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "I know I've hurt you. I know I can't change the past. But I want to try. I want to make it right." Tessa looked at him, her heart torn between the resentment of what had happened and the hope that Malik's words were real. She had been strong for so long, had done everything on her own, and yet here he was, offering a second chance. It was a risky chance, one that could either heal or break them further. As Malik closed the distance between them, his lips brushed hers in a kiss that was both tentative and desperate. The moment their mouths met, it was clear this wasn't just about desire. It wasn't even just about passion. This was about something deeper, reconnection. Tessa's hands found their way to Malik's chest, her fingers lightly tugging at his shirt, pulling him closer. There was an urgency now, a sense of longing that had been buried for too long. The heat between them was undeniable, but it was mixed with the tenderness of two people trying to find their way back to each other. Malik's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against his. For a moment, they simply held each other, breathing in unison, letting the emotion of the moment envelop them. But it wasn't just the intimacy that drew them together. It was the emotional connection, the shared history that had always tied them, and the hope that they could rebuild what they had lost. Tessa's lips parted as she deepened the kiss, her fingers tracing the line of Malik's jaw. There was no more hesitation, no more walls, just the rawness of their need for each other. As they broke the kiss, their foreheads rested against each other, their breaths ragged. "We're not the same people we were before," Tessa whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. "But maybe we can be better together." Malik closed his eyes, his hand gently cupping her face. "I'll be here, Tessa. I promise you that." Flashback, the last goodbye. Timing. as Tessa reflects on her conflicting feelings about Malik's sudden presence in their lives. Tessa's mind drifted back to the night Malik had left, the night he had walked out without looking back, promising that everything he did was for them. She had stood there, watching him drive away, the weight of his departure pressing on her chest like a stone. It had hurt so much, and yet she had promised herself that she wouldn't let it break her. She would survive, for the children, for herself. But now, with Malik back, with him holding her like this, she didn't know what to believe anymore. Tessa pulled back slightly, her eyes meeting Malik's. There was a moment of silence, where both of them stood on the precipice of something new, something fragile, something that could either break them or bring them together. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," Tessa said softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "But I want to. I need to. For us." Malik's gaze softened, his hand brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to trust me all at once. But I'm here. I'll stay here, no matter what." And in that moment, hope replaced doubt. It wasn't a promise of perfection, but a promise of growth. A promise that, despite the mistakes of the past, they could still have a future together. The days that followed were a delicate dance between new beginnings and old fears. Malik's presence in the penthouse had transformed the house from a place of emptiness into something full of quiet possibility. He woke up each morning determined to change, determined to prove to Tessa that he was more than the man who had left her. But for Tessa, the walls she had spent years building remained firm, though she no longer recoiled from his touch. She allowed him to share moments with the children, to help with their daily needs. She allowed him to be the father they hadn't known. Yet, despite these moments, something inside her kept her from truly trusting him. Every time Malik reached out to her, whether it was holding her hand, helping with dinner, or simply offering a smile, there was a nagging doubt in her chest. Could she really allow him to heal what he had broken? Or was she just setting herself up for another round of heartbreak? As Malik continued to prove himself, their connection deepened. The more time they spent together, the more they were able to pick apart the tangled web of resentment, longing, and desire they had woven around their past. But physical tension began to build between them in a way neither of them could ignore. It wasn't just about the stolen glances, the brushes of skin as they passed each other, or the way their breath would catch when they were near. It was a weight of their unspoken history, the raw emotion that still clung to them. One evening, as Tessa prepared dinner in the kitchen, Malik entered the room quietly, his eyes fixed on her as she moved about, chopping vegetables. The rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board filled the silence between them. He watched her for a moment, the soft curves of her body silhouetted by the dim light from the pendant above. Her grace, her elegance despite the hardship she'd faced, never ceased to amaze him. He wanted to reach out, wanted to touch her, but he held himself back. He knew the emotional journey they were on wasn't something he could force. But his desire for her, the magnetic pull he felt every time he saw her, was undeniable. Tessa glanced up as if sensing his gaze, and their eyes locked. She didn't pull away, but instead, she seemed to soften, allowing him into her space. "I never realized how hard this was," Malik said, his voice low and serious. "To not have a family, to not have you. It's empty." Tessa's fingers paused mid-motion, the weight of his words sinking in. Her chest tightened, and she felt her breath quicken. The raw honesty in his voice left her with no defense, no way to hide the vulnerability she'd buried for so long. "You can't just expect to walk in and make everything better," Tessa whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not the same woman I was when you left. Neither are you." "I know," Malik said, stepping closer. His presence enveloped her, the heat of his body contrasting the coolness of the kitchen. "But I can show you, Tessa. I can prove to you that I'm here, that I'll never leave again. I'm ready to be the man I should have been for you." He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. Tessa's pulse quickened at the contact, a jolt of intensity shooting through her. She could feel the chemistry between them, simmering just beneath the surface. But she didn't know if she was ready to let it burn. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can let myself trust anyone again. Not after all the pain." Malik's thumb ran over the back of her hand, the touch soft but sure. "Trust isn't something I expect from you right away. But I need you to know that I'm here for you, for them, no matter what." The sincerity in his voice, the warmth of his touch, slowly began to thaw the walls she had put up. Her defenses, though still there, were starting to weaken. Her heart, though wary, couldn't help but respond to the tenderness in his actions. Tessa closed her eyes, taking a steadying breath. When she opened them again, she met his gaze. The pull between them was undeniable, and for the first time, she didn't feel the need to fight it. Slowly, cautiously, she closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was gentle, exploratory at first, before it deepened into something more urgent. Malik's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as she melted into him. The kiss ignited something within her, a burning desire that she had tried to suppress. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands moving to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. The air around them thickened with need, with a longing that had been building for years. Every moment of silence, every exchange of glances, every touch between them had led to this. It wasn't just about passion. It was about connection, about rediscovering something that had been buried under years of miscommunication and hurt. Tessa's fingers moved to the collar of Malik's shirt, her body pressing against his as she pulled him closer. There was no hesitation now, no more walls between them. She felt the weight of their shared history and the promise in his touch. He pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against hers, breathless. "I need you, Tessa," he whispered, his voice thick with desire. "I'm here," she replied, her lips brushing against his, her body responding to the heat of his touch. And in that moment, as the fire between them burned brighter, they both knew something had shifted. They weren't the same people they had been before. They were learning to trust again, to love again, and to let go of the past. Flashback, the night she left. Timing, as Tessa recalls her inner conflict and fear of repeating the past. Tessa's mind drifted back to the night she left. The night Malik had promised her the world, but failed to deliver the one thing she needed, his presence. The night he walked out without looking back, leaving her to raise their children alone. She had made a choice that night, a choice to protect her heart. She had promised herself she wouldn't let him back in. But now, standing in his arms, her defenses felt like they were crumbling, like a dam breaking under the weight of the emotions she had long held inside. As their kiss deepened, Tessa allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what they had lost. But the doubts, the fears of being hurt again, lingered in the back of her mind. But for now, she was here, with him. The following days were a quiet storm of emotions, actions, and realizations. The children's health had taken a positive turn, but it wasn't just their bodies that were healing. It was the family that was being mended. Every day, Malik spent more time with them. Every smile from the children felt like a small victory, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, things could be fixed. But the real challenge was still with Tessa. Despite the undeniable pull between them, despite the tenderness of their moments together, Tessa was still holding back. There was a part of her that feared repeating the mistakes of the past. Could she trust Malik again? Could she allow herself to fully love him, knowing the weight of their past? Malik, for his part, wasn't perfect. He couldn't undo the years he had spent neglecting them, and he couldn't erase the pain he had caused. But he was doing everything he could now. Everything. Flashback. The moment he realized he was lost without her. Timing. As Malik continues his journey of redemption, reflecting on the past, Malik's thoughts often drifted back to the moment when everything changed for him. The night Tessa had packed her things, had left without looking back. The night he realized just how much he had taken her for granted. The memory was still vivid, still cutting into his chest every time he thought of it. That night, Tessa had told him she couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't live with a man who valued everything else more than his family. His ambition had blinded him, and in that moment, he realized just how much he had failed her. And yet, even in the aftermath of that moment, when Malik was alone, his thoughts never strayed too far from her. She had always been his anchor, the one person who understood him, who saw through his cold exterior, who loved him in spite of himself. He had lost her once, and he wasn't going to let that happen again, not when he had the chance to make it right. Present time, the turning point. One evening, after dinner, Tessa sat at the kitchen table, the glow of the candles casting soft shadows over her face. Malik entered the room, his presence almost electric, as if he could feel the shift in the air. He had been giving her space, letting her come to him, but tonight, something felt different. The walls between them were still there, but they were thinner, almost fragile. He could feel it. Tessa looked up at him, her expression unreadable, and for a moment, the tension in the room was thick. She had spent years guarding herself from him, keeping her heart under lock and key. But now there was something in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability. Malik stepped forward, his heart racing as he looked down at her. "Tessa," he said softly, "I've never been good at this, but I'm going to try. For you, for us." Her breath caught as she looked at him, her mind racing with memories, fears, and desires. Could she allow herself to believe in him again? Could she trust him after all these years of pain and silence? "Malik, Her voice trailed off, the words stuck in her throat. There was so much she wanted to say, but the fear of being vulnerable again held her back. Malik didn't give her time to pull away. His hands found hers, gently but firmly, grounding her. "You don't have to say anything, Tessa," he whispered. "I just need you to know that I'm here, and I will always be here for you, for the kids. You've been so strong for so long, and I've seen that, but you don't have to carry this alone anymore." Tessa's heart pounded in her chest, her walls shaking at the sincerity in his voice. She had spent so many years alone, convincing herself that she could do this by herself, that she didn't need him. But here he was offering her more than just promises. He was offering his presence, his heart, his commitment. For the first time in so long, Tessa allowed herself to let go of the past. She looked up at him, her eyes softening as the barrier between them finally crumbled. She could feel the shift in the air, the tension, the desire, the raw emotions that had been simmering between them finally found their release. She kissed him then, her lips meeting his with gentleness that spoke volumes. It wasn't just a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of trust, of hope, of healing. The kiss deepened, slowly at first, but then with a hunger that neither could deny. Their bodies came together, the years of longing and unspoken words finally finding their release in the warmth of the moment. As they pulled away, breathless, Tessa rested her forehead against his, their hearts pounding together. "I'm scared, Malik," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I want to try. I want to try with you." Malik's hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing the tears from her cheeks. "You don't have to be scared anymore, Tessa. We'll face this together." The promise in his voice, the depth of his commitment, was all she needed. In that moment, she knew that they weren't just starting over. They were building something new, something that would last. Their love wasn't just about passion. It was about growth, about coming together through the cracks and healing in ways neither had imagined possible. Final emotional climax and resolution. The night was filled with the echoes of their love, the soft murmurs, the quiet promises, the sensual embrace of two people who had finally allowed themselves to be vulnerable with each other. As the morning light crept through the blinds, Malik and Tessa lay beside each other, their bodies intertwined, their hearts finally aligned. They had faced the storms of their past, and now they had found peace in the warmth of each other's arms. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, Malik knew that he didn't have to face it alone. He had Tessa, and he had their children, and together, they would build a future stronger than the past that had nearly torn them apart.